Hello friends. Welcome back to Fox Fan Fiction. Aaj hum lekar aaye hain ek legendary transformation ki story. What if Naruto didn't just become Hokage? Balki Emperor of the Storm Band Kar Pura Ninja World Par Raj Karta. High Voltage Crown. Aur Uske Soth Hun. Beautiful and powerful Kunoichi warriors. Jo Uske Liye Kuchbi Karne Ko Tair Hain. Heart and Arrow Fire. Agar Op Storm King Emperor Naruto Dekna Chat Ho. To video ko like, share or subscribe Zaror Karain. A Flat Chalie Dosto, Part 1 Shuru Kart Hain. Fire High Voltage. Chapter 1. Hi, so this is my new story. It starts of during Naruto's training trip with Jiraiya, but because there are certain events that don't happen as they did in canon, I will start with a flashback that changed things. Prologue. Hiruzen stopped by the door at Naruto's apartment. He placed the plastics he held down and knocked. Not twice but 5 times. There was no response. He was certain though, that Naruto was somewhere inside the building. He opened the door and walked in. It was always unlocked. There was a sign of danger painted at the door. Someone had put it there. Naruto never bothered to remove it, neither did he. But at least no one would dare walk inside the place. So Naruto never locked it. Not a night. Not when he was running through the village. Not when he was in the forest of death. The place was cold. And eerily silent. Hiruzen shivered slightly. He should be used to this. But this was his ritual every time he came here. He'd brought in a TV, just maybe to give it some life, but Naruto hardly used it. One day he would turn it on and leave it on a news channel. When he comes back, it is going to be on the same channel, remote still where he left it. He didn't bother saying anything anymore. The Sandaime walked over to the small kitchen. The apartment wasn't the best. But it had everything. He had made sure of it. Still, this wouldn't mean much. Even if he bought a large fridge, with Naruto by himself, it would only have ramen inside. The damn villagers wouldn't sell him food. They wouldn't sell him anything. Since they couldn't touch him, they thought death by starvation was one way to go about. To some, it was just the fear of losing customers. Who wanted to buy in the same shop as the Kyuubi brat. Shaking his head, Hiruzen silently unloaded the grocery and packed it in the fridge and cupboards. He did this every month. Perhaps it was his punishment for the way things have gone. But if he didn't do it, Naruto wouldn't eat decent food. At least the blonde ate. He could cook. He had taught him how to cook. Once he was done, Hiruzen looked around. It was always tidy. Naruto was clean. He was a miserable lonely child, but at least he cleaned up his place. That was at least something good. But not something that made him smile. There were still many problems that didn't look like they were going to go away. And there wasn't much he could do about it. To feel so powerless to change things, Hiruzen had never been so frustrated, and he was called the professor. He had learned every fire-based jutsu in the fire country. He had solved many puzzles, and yet, Naruto's life was one he could not solve. No matter what he said, the villagers would undo it with their glares and blatant whispers of contempt. Minato would be so disappointed. He walked over to Naruto's bedroom. It was a one-bedroom apartment. There was no sense of life. The door wasn't fully closed. Slowly, he opened it. It made a creeping sound. He cursed. But when he walked in, there was Naruto sitting by the window. A small boy, no more than 5 years 11 months old. His knee was raised, his other leg inside with his back leaning against the window frame. His eyes were cast outside. He had been here all this time. Just silent. Just never reacting. When did it start? How did it even come to this point? Naruto had been happy. He had smiled and laughed. But these days, he rarely went outside. He spent most time sitting by the window, motionless, as if dead. It pained him. Naruto, Hiruzen forced a smile as he walked over the child. His tone was gentle. Naruto didn't react until he stopped by the window. Hiruzen touched the blonde on the shoulder. He almost startled him. Lost in thought, Naruto faced the third for a moment. There wasn't much on his face. He looked at the plastic on the third's hands. Clothes. He did need some of them. Once more, he looked outside the window. There wasn't much to look at. Just happy people, sending glares whenever they saw him. Is it that time of the month already? Naruto finally spoke. His tone was quiet, slow. Month end. The time for an allowance, new food. And to open the tin he hid his savings. The sandaime gave him more than enough. It was a pity he couldn't spend it all even if he wanted. Most shops had a sign that said we don't sell to demons. Hiruzen nodded. I brought you something. Naruto had to turn around to look at the sandaime. His tone had been filled with excitement. It was obvious from his eyes that he was holding himself from exploding with the news. Naruto grew curious, maybe even hopeful. I've never seen you so excited unless you're reading that book you keep hidden in your robes, Gigi, Naruto said. He couldn't keep out the curiosity in his tone. Are you finally going to let me see? Hiruzen coughed. He placed the plastic he held down. And then knelt. Naruto then turned over to him and stood facing him. He had done it automatically without any urging. The third placed both his hands on Naruto's shoulders. His lips twisted upside down. He was apologetic. I'm sorry for not having done this earlier, Naruto. He stared into those confused blue orbs for a moment before pulling Naruto into a tight hug. I am sorry. Naruto stiffened sharply. He wasn't used to this. His personal space intruded. When the sandaime didn't let go, his hands slowly moved and he wrapped them around the old man. Warmth. It was a beautiful feeling. He pulled tighter to get more of it. He buried face on the sandaime's shoulder, enjoying the warmth. It was at moments like this that something he couldn't explain occurred to his heart. His eyes usually water. But the feeling was good. He didn't always get it. But it was good. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't dislike it, even though it nearly brought him to tears. You're going to suffocate me, Naruto. I'm still an old man, the sandaime said with a chuckle before pulling away. Naruto smiled. Yes, he smiled. It was an embarrassed smile. Sorry, he murmured. Hiruzen was happy to see that smile. He cherished it for a moment. There was truly hope. Not all was lost. Yes, there was hope. Listen very carefully, Naruto. You are not going to tell anyone what I am going to tell you, and you will not show anyone what I am about to give you. He paused. Do you understand me? Naruto didn't have anyone he could tell. He had no friends. He didn't have family. He was alone in this world. Maybe he could tell the old man at the ramen stand, but that was that. Yet, he was confused. Why would the old man say he couldn't tell anyone when he had no one to tell? It wasn't by design of an obsession with solitude. He had tried. He has wasted so many hours and days chasing friends. Even if he made them for a couple of minutes, their mothers would come and drag them away. Don't play with him, don't talk to him. They would say. It hurt him. It seriously wounded him. The last friends he had made tricked him. They saw he was too eager to make friends and then tricked him. They had sent him to the forest of death. He should have known with the danger signs on the fences. He should have known when they laughed with madness when he crawled under the fence, but he had been eager. The forest had nearly killed him. The sandaime hadn't been amused. He had told him what happened. He had explained things and then swore those boys would never become shinobi. And they never did. Naruto had stopped trying. He had stopped. He had seen the ugliness of people. It terrified him. And he didn't want to experience it again. Why? Do you trust me, Naruto? Naruto quickly nodded. Yes, he said firmly. Hiruzen smiled. It will do your life harm if you tell anyone. I can't risk that, Naruto. I cannot risk anything happening to you. There was the chance that people would make connections. No, they would make connections. He wasn't worried about the Yondaime's enemies. He was worried about the villagers. They could reject the truth and try to harm Naruto for claiming otherwise. It wouldn't be pretty. He took out a picture from his robes. It wasn't framed. He handed it over to Naruto, who grasped it with both his hands. He was trembling. That, Naruto, is a picture of your mother. She was carrying you when it was taken. Like I told you, she died during the Kyuubi rampage. Mother. His mother. Her hair was red. It was that crimson color. Dangerous color. He was blonde. Naruto didn't question it. For the first time in his cold, brutal life filled with loneliness and contempt, Naruto had a mother. He had a mother. He wasn't the spawn of a demon. He wasn't the Kyuubi. He was born of this woman. This beautiful woman. The picture. He held it against his raging heart and walked over to his bed. He sat down. He had a mother. Those words repeated 1,000 times inside his head. Until tears rolled over his eyes. He made sure he didn't water the picture. Naruto felt happy. He felt relieved. He felt as if something had closed in his heart. Hiruzen took out a shirt from the clothes he brought. He looked at the Uzumaki symbol for a moment before nodding his head. If it was going to bring Naruto happiness, then he would do it. He sat beside the blonde, but didn't say anything. Not until a couple of minutes passed. He didn't want to ruin the moment. Hell, and Anbu even came before him to tell him there was an urgent meeting with his advisors, but he brushed it off. It could wait. He had much more important matters to deal with. Her name was Kushina. Kushina Uzumaki. The same name as his. Uzumaki. Naruto stared at his mother. But he listened to the Sandaime Hokage attentively. He didn't want to miss anything. Most of your clothes have this symbol. You can see it even in Konoha's Jonin vests at the back. This is the symbol of the Uzumaki clan. Your clan, Naruto. Your mother's clan. Before you get hopeful, there are no more Uzumakis out there. At least as far as I know. Your ancestral home, the home where your mother came from, was destroyed during the Second Shinobi World War. He went on to tell Naruto the fame of the Uzumaki clan, its history with the Senju clan. He told the blonde most things. It wasn't a happy thing since the clan was destroyed and Uzu was nothing more than just ruins. But he believed it would give Naruto a sense of belonging. No matter what people say to him, he would know he came from somewhere and his mother once belonged to a prestigious clan. Gigi, will you take me to Uzu? I want to see it. I want to see it. He said those words with hope and excitement. Hiruzen frowned, but he didn't let it show to Naruto. Perhaps if he saw it, he would fully believe. It was one thing to be told about something than seeing it yourself. I will clear my calendar and take you there, but, he pressed his index finger on his lips. Don't tell anyone about it. When we go, it will be just the two of us. No one in this village will know. Naruto nodded vigorously. He would not tell a soul. Naruto had his eyes closed, standing on a tree branch in the middle of a forest, feeling the pressure of the wind. When it came to hiding his presence, Jiraiya was a master. To suggest that the perverted geezer learned this trade in order to peep would not be far off. Jiraiya had perfected jutsus for his lustful desires. He could deprive himself of sleep trying to figure out the defenses of a hot spring that was locked away to hide from perverts such as him. He didn't open his eyes when the Sannin flashed on behind him, in midair. His right foot blasting the airwaves as it moved towards the back of his head. On his left hand, Naruto held a kunai before ducking under the fast-coming kick. The moment it went above him, his body twisted in blinding fashion while he leapt into the air, getting away from the tree branch. Jiraiya grinned as Naruto faced him. He could see the kunai on his left hand. Naruto was deadly precise with those. It was always coated with chakra. Without blinking, the blonde flung the kunai. The hand movements weren't extreme. It just seemed as if he was flicking it. But the speed in which it traveled was dangerously fast. The grin on his lips disappeared. The toad sage bent his body backwards, his head facing the heavens as the kunai blasted past him. He felt the wind brush his face as it went by. The kunai hit a tree, blasting past it. Jiraiya didn't have the time adjust his body as Naruto flashed above him, a Rasengan on the palm of his right hand. He cursed the blonde's speed. The Rasengan was slammed into his chest. When it connected, the Sannin exploded into puff of smoke. Kaden, fire dragon's breath. Jiraiya breathed out a stream of crimson flames from his mouth. He was standing on the ground, looking up as the flames rushed up towards Naruto who still floating in midair, body positioned slightly horizontal after the momentum of his Rasengan. Looking at the incoming flames, Naruto moved his right hand across his chest. He closed his eyes, and then snapped his fingers. A wave of his chakra was released from his fingers. It was invisible to the eye. The wave covered a certain distance but what it did was blast the oxygen away. The effect lasted for no more than 2 seconds. The flames that had been coming towards him simply died off, just like that. It was the weakness of flames. They needed oxygen to burn. Regardless of power and speed, as long as there was no oxygen, the flames would not burn. Ah, he loved his jutsu. You're wide open, Jiraiya announced. He was on Naruto's right side, still in midair. There was no more warning when his left-right foot slammed onto Naruto's shoulder, sending the blonde flying away. As the force of the kick carried him, Naruto avoided wincing. Jiraiya's physical attacks carried a brutal kind of strength. He flipped several times with his senses fully functioning. As he was about to pass a tree branch, he stretched out both his hands and grabbed it. He attempted to swing forward but Jiraiya once again appeared. The Sannin was right in front of him, the man punched him on his chest. When the brutal punch connected, Naruto burst into a cloud of smoke. Jiraiya frowned before flashing away. He landed on the ground and leaned against a tree trunk. His eyes flashed open when he sensed something coming in fast. He couldn't react when a kunai went through on his right, it cut slightly his cheek before piercing through the trunk of the tree. Jiraiya sweated as blood dripped from his cheek. His heart pounded a bit with relief. That could have opened his skull had it been intended to do so. "You're getting destructed." Naruto was in front of the Sannin, his right foot weaving through the air before slamming onto his chest. The attack planted the Sannin against the tree. With his foot still connected with Jiraiya's chest, Naruto formed a small Rasengan in the blink of an eye. As he retreated his foot, he was driving the jutsu towards Jiraiya's chest. The Sannin dropped to the ground and Naruto's jutsu collided with the trunk of the tree, breaking it. As the tree began to fall, Jiraiya did a leg sweep, making Naruto off balance and start to fall backwards. The Sannin flashed above the blonde. Naruto quickly crossed both his hands above him as the back of Jiraiya's right foot came crashing towards his face. His defense held firmly and Naruto quickly grabbed Jiraiya's foot. He balanced himself quickly before spinning around in quick motions. He flung Jiraiya towards a tree. Futon. Wind bullet. He spat out a bullet of wind from his mouth. The bullet hit Jiraiya on his chest and propelled him further backwards. His back crashed into a tree with a sickening thud. Naruto was right before him, not easing up on his attack. He held a sword, coated with wind chakra. He swung it horizontally and seemingly cut through both Jiraiya and the tree, but the Sannin turned into a log. Jiraiya was behind Naruto, crashing down. His hands were held together, creating a giant fist. The slammed the hammer down with all his strength, hitting Naruto on his right shoulder. The force caused Naruto to fall to his knees, dropping his sword as his hand trembled and throbbed painfully. The Sannin wasn't done. The moment he touched down, he lifted his right foot, kicking Naruto on the back of his head. It was brutal. It forced Naruto to hit the trunk of the tree he'd just cut with his forehead. A sense of dizziness gripped his mind for a moment as his vision blurred. Birds chirped for a second. Jiraiya grabbed him and then lifted him up into the air. The Sannin was holding him up by his throat. "Just one hand. Shall we call an end to it?" "Too soon," Naruto muttered. He moved quickly. Both his hands grabbed Jiraiya's arm. He put so much pressure on his fingers that he stopped the flow of blood and Jiraiya's grip loosened. His legs moved up and he wrapped them around Jiraiya's arm. The Sannin cursed loudly before slamming Naruto on the ground. There was a loud boom as Naruto crashed with his back. But he didn't let go. He even started twisting the arm. Jiraiya started tapping on the ground comically before yelling, "Naruto, you are going to break my hand. Do something about it." Naruto yelled back, careless of Jiraiya's pain, "You shitty brat, if you break my hand, I won't be able to do research properly. That is worse than death." Naruto shrugged. "It will save you from pain and women will have their dignity back." Jiraiya cursed once more and used his free hand to form a hand seal. His hair stretched and wrapped around Naruto. He strangled the blonde, forcing him to let him go. Once free, he hurled the blonde away. Naruto flipped several times before touching the ground with both his hands, trying to stop the momentum. Once he stopped, an earth spike burst from the ground. It was sharp, and dangerously moving towards his chest. Naruto propelled his body backwards by pushing chakra into his fingers to push himself. The spike missed him, just by a whisker. Jiraiya expected this. He was upon the blonde. Twisting as he moved, he channeled chakra onto his fight foot and then slammed it on Naruto's face. The kick picked the blonde off the ground, but before he could do anywhere, Jiraiya grabbed his right foot and then twisted him up before hurling him towards a tree. Naruto didn't have enough room to balance his body and so he crashed into the tree with his back. The Sannin appeared in front of him, driving his punch towards his chest. Jiraiya sensed a spike of chakra and tried to retreat. The blonde burst into a swirl of hundreds of small wind blades. He landed a distance away, but before he could even glance at the damage, he felt the air leave his lungs. Naruto was standing just away from him, with a bleeding face, but he was sucking all the oxygen away. It became harder to breathe for Jiraiya. He fell on his knees, clutched his chest, his mouth hung open. He was going to pass out. There was no relief when it stopped. Naruto kicked him on his forehead with a wind-enhanced kick. He guessed it was payback for his earlier kick. Jiraiya felt his head tremble violently. His vision blurred as dizziness took over. He didn't even feel it when he hit a tree with his back. His senses came back when something slammed into his gut, causing him to spit out saliva while falling on his knees, hands on his gut. The attacks were enhanced with wind. It wasn't like Tsunade, but they did the damage. Naruto fell down on his butt, his breathing labored. He wiped out the blood on his face and then fell on his back. He needed to rest. Once the pain was over, Jiraiya leaned against a tree trunk and looked at his hand. It was bleeding with several cuts. He applied his medical ninjutsu to stop the bleeding. The cuts were not deep, so they closed. After a couple of moments of silence, he looked at Naruto. His right hand still ached from that lock. The blonde was improving. He was getting better and better by each month. This training trip had been the best option for Naruto. If they hadn't done this, he wouldn't have gotten closer to his godson, he wouldn't be producing another shinobi who would surpass him. It was still early days, but one day, Naruto would surpass him. He would be better than him. Jiraiya was honestly proud. Minato had been a genius, but Naruto had potential and he used it to his advantage. He knew his potential. The blonde was also willing to learn. I'm no longer taking it easy on you, Jiraiya more or less grumbled. The last hits had been unpleasant. It has been quite a while since someone managed to hit him so hard. I told you to bring your A game, even senjutsu if possible. I'd kill you with senjutsu. And I am soon going to cripple you if you're not careful. Naruto retorted. Jiraiya frowned. That was true. He couldn't deny it. It wasn't the arrogance speaking. It was a fact. Before their training ends, Naruto was most likely going to leave him bedridden for a couple of days. They did fight with the intention to kill. There was no friendly. You could break a leg. It was part of the training. Part of fighting experience. More than anyone, Jiraiya knew the experience was important for survival. Your reflexes are good and your speed has improved. But you need to stop leaving gaps between your attacks. Jiraiya lectured. You also leave yourself open each time you snap your fingers. It is only for a second. When fighting against normal shinobi, I can recover quickly. Don't take comfort in that. You will fight people even faster than me. If they are faster, they will attack on that lapse of concentration. If you cannot work around the problem, it is best you leave that jutsu for emergencies. I think that would be best, Naruto said before going silent for a moment. It requires maximum concentration and I must stop breathing monetarily. For you it might be seconds, but for me, it is like minutes. Well, we can't take away the fact that the jutsu is a work of genius. It basically makes the fire element useless against you, Jiraiya smiled. When are you going to broaden your arsenal? You can't be satisfied with just wind. That aside, wind is weak against some elements. You must always be ready to adapt to any change, and using different elements helps in this regard. I can work something out with fire. Given my extensive knowledge of the element, using fire-based jutsus for me should require minimal effort, Naruto said, getting up. I will send a letter to Tsunade for her to send us some scrolls with fire-based jutsus, he said while getting. Come on, let us go back to the town. He looked at himself and frowned. This is going to drive away customers. Don't flatter yourself, you're not pleasant to look at even when you are clean. Jiraiya glared at Naruto. Neither are you. He spat. Naruto shrugged. I have never been pleasant to look at. I have accepted that, he said indifferently. But you seem to be struggling with denial. You should sit in a dark corner and repeat after yourself, I'm not pleasant to look at, I'm not pleasant to look at. I know it will finally click in. Jiraiya didn't ease on his glare. The cold dark humor. Sometimes Jiraiya questioned Naruto's sanity. But he knew there was no harm. He was used to it. They would be laughing any moment. It has always been like this. At least he was with his godson. Who else did he have? The sandane was gone and that had truly shattered the blonde. The old man was everything to Naruto. And when he died, without saying a word to him, Naruto has suffered. And then there was Sasuke. The cursed Uchiha. Thinking of him made Jiraiya angry. Well, not since they left Konoha has Naruto brought up the subject. Not once, not ever. Hell, the blonde didn't even talk about Konoha. And Jiraiya didn't push. He was getting close, there was no need to venture into territories Naruto didn't want to touch. But he understood that they couldn't ignore it forever. They would have to talk about it because sooner or later, they would have to return to Konoha. You could at least try to be nice, you know. My heart isn't that strong anymore, he said with mock misery, feigning to be 100 years old. Old people are locked up in their homes, Naruto said. He sighed and stared into the heavens. What do you think is up in the sky where we cannot see, sensei? Jiraiya cast his eyes into the clear sky. He stared for a moment before shaking his head. I don't think there is anything there. I don't think there is life there. Interesting, isn't it? Naruto said. What? You say there is no life there, but up in there is where this world receives its life. If the heavens do not make clouds for rain, the trees, the animals, the grass, these things will die. The rivers will eventually run dry and people will be next. There is no life there, and yet, it is where we receive our lives. Once again, Jiraiya looked into the sky. He couldn't argue with the blonde on that note. One thing he has noted about the blonde was that he was deeply knowledgeable about many things. And he knew how to apply his knowledge. Perhaps it was the wisdom he gained from spending much time with the Sandaime Hokage. When you spend time people, something about them also rubs off you. That is nature, Jiraiya said. Naruto nodded. Yes, nature, so beautiful, calming, and yet it can be so dangerous. I like nature, he said before changing the subject. I have been curious, you have no shame, have you ever tried peeping on Tsunade? Jiraiya's body froze. Yes, it was more of a whimper than anything. He could never forget that memory. He still had those wounds from the beating she had dished on him. He fought with the crazy side of him that said it was worth it because he had nearly died that day, literally. Tsunade had pummeled him hard. She had broken so many bones, the pain. Worse, she healed him after doing it and then threatened to beat him into the brink of his life again if he tried it once more. Well, those had been younger days. He could escape now, but he wouldn't dare try it again. He had learned his lesson. Judging by that response, you must have received quite the beating. You don't know half of it, Jiraiya said with his eyes closed. He swallowed hard to banish the memory. She nearly killed me. Since then, I say anything to her but never again. Never again. But you did see, right? Naruto glanced at the Sannin. It must have been something else. She must have been a very delicate young lady when she was younger. She was, Jiraiya said. She is still beautiful, he added. Naruto didn't comment on that. He just nodded. Without much being said, the two headed back to the town. The walk was silent, both in their thoughts. Jiraiya was thinking about what they had to do next while Naruto was thinking about certain things in his life. Once they reached their motel, Jiraiya took a shower and changed his clothes. There was no need to rest for the Sannin, he was going out and likely not to return for the night. Naruto didn't question it, he knew what the Sannin was going to do. They had chosen this town because of its fun activities. There were casinos, brothels. Jiraiya's kind of hunting ground. He loved places like this. He always danced with joy when he thought of what kind of material he was going to gain through his peeping work or getting drunk with young girls who giggled and laughed hysterically whilst he tells them his legendary stories. The man walked out of the bathroom, already grinning madly. You could see it in his eyes, his body language. He was going to have fun. Well, the past 4 days had been spent training vigorously. The man probably felt he needed to reward himself. Jiraiya contained himself and walked over to the window. He opened it and then turned back to face Naruto. We are going to leave this town in the next couple of days, he said a bit seriously. They never stayed at one place for too long. The longest they had stayed was 2 months, they were always moving around, seeing different places. Sometimes they didn't even camp with people. They would stay in the middle of nowhere. For survival, it was hunting. They always made sure there was water close if they were going to camp in the middle of nowhere. We have stayed long enough and I am certain that by tomorrow, you'll no longer be able to walk in the streets without women chasing after you along with their husbands. Jiraiya glared at Naruto. It had happened at their last village. It hadn't been fun and he had been forced to depart early. He was surely not going to return to that village again. He would be burnt on a stake like a witch if he returned to that place. There were wanted posters of him in good spots. And whose fault was it that I was nearly killed? Naruto shrugged. You left without giving me money for food. What was I supposed to eat? You're a man, you need to make a plan and you didn't have to expose me like that. I wouldn't need to make a plan if I wasn't forced to use my money to bail us out after you lost your wallet when running away from one of your conquests. Jiraiya smiled. Remembering that day, that had been truly a good day. That woman had assets as big as Tsunade's. She was just sitting there in the water, never minding her nudity, doing things to herself. Jiraiya had never been quite pleased. Anyway, he fought the blush gracing his cheeks. When I come back, you must be ready. I will look for a mission you can do. This time, it will have to be difficult. Naruto sighed, so, you'll be gone for a couple of days. The Sannin nodded. He took out his wallet and stared at his money. He glanced at Naruto and then his money. He frowned. If he didn't give enough, Naruto was going to hunt him down and ruin things for him. He counted a few bills and put them down. I put enough for food and some fun, he finished with a grin. With that, he jumped out of the window and was gone. Naruto shook his head and walked over to the window. He leaned against the window while sitting down, his right foot close to his chest with his left touching the floor inside. He rested his right hand on his knee and stared down at the streets. This was his comfort zone. How many days has he seen, sitting like this? He couldn't remember. They were too many to count. Almost all days he had a window, he performed this ritual. The streets filled with people. Mothers walking with their daughters, boys chasing each other, drunkards, walking past with a stench that turned people away. He saw this scene almost every day. Yet he was never tired of seeing it. The past 16 years of his life have never been dull. There was always something happening. Had it not been for the old man, it would have been chaotic at best, but when he saw those mothers, he remembered his own mother, the woman who gave birth to him. Now he knew he had a father. The Sandaime had left it as his last revelation before he died, a painful experience that had been. Losing the one you loved, the one who saved your sanity. Jiraiya had come in, talked to Tsunade and he was taken out of the village after a couple of months of misery and solitude. For more than 2 years now, he has been running around the elemental nations with the Sannin. He has seen many things. Many people, the shamefulness of Jiraiya, and he had learned to drink. He had learned to speak to women. He was still young, but his body was growing fast. Then again, the old man had always ensured that he ate healthy. After an hour, a bird flew over to Naruto and landed on his right shoulder. He stood up and walked over to a small wooden table in the wide room and sat on a cushion. He took the scroll it carried and the bird flew over to the window. It stood there, as if standing watch. It always did that each time it came. Naruto opened the small scroll and channeled chakra through it. Another scroll appeared in a puff of smoke. It was another storage scroll. He channeled chakra on the seal and then 5 mountains of papers appeared in a puff of smoke. He blinked. Work. It always came for him wherever he was. For 5 hours straight, without a break or anything, Naruto worked through the papers. Once done, he sealed them in the scroll and snapped his fingers. The small bird flew over to the table. He wrapped the small paper on the container on its leg. Do you need something to eat? It nodded its head as if it could understand his words. Naruto smiled and stood up. He returned with a small cup of water and fresh bread. The bird ate and then drank. If you drank, I'd give you some sake as thank you. The bird seemed to shake its head as if to say, alcohol. No thank you. Naruto laughed. Safe journey, he said. The bird made a sound before flying away. The sun was already setting, it would be night soon. He couldn't sit here forever, he would lose his mind. Naruto went over to clean himself and then changed his clothes. Once done, he took a nap. By the time he woke up, it was dark outside. He pocketed the bills Jiraiya left him and put his hands on his pockets before walking out. He was already familiar with the town. He knew where to go, but it usually depended on where the wind was blowing. His mind wasn't focused on the road ahead, so he only blinked when he stopped at a bar. He could hear the music blasting from inside, voices of male and females. Miserable people having fun and happy people expressing their joy. To be human, to be alive. People came here. There was a guard at the entrance. It was to guard against children walking inside. The young ones had a rebellious streak about them. They liked the joys of the adults. The forbidden ecstasy always seemed to be too attracting to humans. Naruto just still 16, still underage, but he was a shinobi. Those rules didn't apply. When the large man saw his headband, he merely grunted and opened way for him. The insides were dimly lit. The noise was too much. But those who complained about it shouldn't be here in the first place. They should be at home sleeping or reading night stories to their kids. If you couldn't handle the pressure, just stay away from it, or so a certain lady had told him. Naruto went towards the bar. He didn't sit, he looked around and saw a free table by a corner. It was dark and you couldn't see clearly. It was his perfect place. He ordered 4 bottles. Once they came, he took 2 cups and walked over to his little corner. Solitude. The alcohol. Ah, the perfect combination to drown in bitterness. Konoha. It has been 2.5 years since Naruto left the village and still, there was no mention from Jiraiya on when they would return. Her friend hadn't even been returning. He sent letters every now and then, but he never showed up. Even now, she was looking at his letter. She was going to write for him to show up before her. Tsunade missed them. She really did miss the two. They had brought her back to this village and now they were running around in the elemental nation without her, her old life. She hoped that Jiraiya wasn't teaching Naruto how to gamble. She had permitted them to go away because Naruto hadn't been the most happiest of people. He was miserable. The Sandame's death had affected him deeply and from what she had learned was that the old man had been the only person he talked to before he made a couple of friends at the academy. It hadn't been easy and that only happened in his last year. Jiraiya said he was fine. But she was a bit concerned. He was family in a way. He was the son of Kushina, someone who had been from her grandmother's clan and someone who was close to the old woman. She wasn't the one who was by Mito when she died, it had been Kushina, Naruto's mother. So, she did consider him family. Tsunade placed the letter on top of her desk and tapped her fingers. Something wrong, Tsunade-sama? Sakura asked quietly. The slug princess glanced at the Pinkett. She had grown. Well, she had trained her well. But she was still obsessed with Sasuke. That rotten child. He had been spoiled rotten. From what she knew, Tsunade didn't understand why the villagers adored him. She didn't see why girls liked him. He had a cold personality and he was rude. Did the girls really like him like that? If someone said they had been brainwashed, Tsunade wouldn't disagree. Sakura had been willing to throw a fit if someone said bad things about her beloved. The damned Uchiha. No, Tsunade said with a shake of her head. I'm just worried about Naruto. It has been 2.5 years now and from Jiraiya's letters, they are still training. He is even requesting scrolls to continue with Naruto's training, she explained with a frown. Naruto, her teammate, the boy she'd been cruel to in their days. At some point, even Sasuke had yelled at her and told her that she didn't understand anything. She didn't know anything. Sakura had been hurt but she hadn't understood why Sasuke gave her that reaction. Now she did. She had been cruel to him. She never acted like a teammate. There were good memories but her attitude towards Naruto bothered her these days when she looked back at it. Perhaps it was because now she understood things about him. She knew his story. She knew why he got along with Sasuke. They were both lonely people. They both didn't have anyone. And she had mocked Naruto for not having parents. Sasuke didn't have them either, but she had considered that his had died. Naruto had never known his. He was an orphan but she never considered Sasuke as an orphan, but he was in the same boat as Naruto. How is he? Sakura asked carefully. Jiraiya never explains in detail but he is fine, Tsunade said a bit bitterly. Sakura was surprised at the realization. So he has never sent you a letter? Tsunade nodded. No, not even one, not since he left. I have only been hearing from Jiraiya. If this continues, I will order them to come back, she said firmly. She didn't say anything as Shizune walked into the office, holding more stacks of papers. She frowned. Why do you have to bring that load now? I just finished another one. It is going to pile up if I leave it, Shizune said calmly. There is also this, she said handing a report to Tsunade. The Godime looked at the report for a moment before frowning. Troubling news. She didn't need it now. She closed it and put it on the drawer on her desk. She handled the letter from Jiraiya to Shizune. Please make sure you get everything in the list, I need to send them to Jiraiya. Shizune looked at the list. She left quietly without saying another word to Tsunade. Once Shizune was gone, Sakura took the opportunity to ask. Anything on Sasuke? She asked hopefully. Her eyes widened, she didn't want to miss anything on Tsunade's face. Tsunade shook her head. Still nothing. Well, he is with Orochimaru, he is rather difficult to track down, she frowned. But we must find him. The time is coming for Orochimaru to change bodies, and if we don't act, he might take Sasuke's body. That will be over for the Uchiha. Sasuke-kun won't let that happen, Sakura said firmly. When Tsunade merely stared at her, she sunk down a bit and became nervous and worried. Do you think he will? That is the only reason Orochimaru gave him the cursed seal, Tsunade said. That aside, Naruto did say Sasuke said he was going to sell his soul to the devil to get the power to kill his brother. If it means giving his body to Orochimaru to kill Itachi, then he might do it. I wouldn't even be surprised if Orochimaru manages to twist Sasuke into allowing him to get his revenge for him. For a moment, Sakura's body froze. If that happened, she would never see her beloved. He would become Orochimaru. They really had to find him. If Tsunade wasn't winning, she would look herself. Can't you ask Jiraiya-sama to do something? I didn't want to burden him, but it looks like I don't have a choice. Tsunade said. 4 days after Jiraiya left Naruto. It was in the afternoon when Jiraiya returned. He found Naruto sitting motionlessly by the window. Perhaps it was something they had in common, but he never sat there like he was dead. Naruto never even used the window like the door. Never ever. Jiraiya had never seen it. Even when he was sitting there and had to go out, he would out through the door. It was strange, but Jiraiya never questioned. That took you long enough, Naruto said without turning to face the Sannin. I'd stepped out of the town to receive some information, Jiraiya said as he sat down next to Naruto. He had his back leaning against the wall, the blonde on his left side. You know my network is very busy. I know, you sometimes leave for a month chasing shadows, Naruto responded. He glanced down at the Sannin for a moment. What did you discover this time? Jiraiya realized, there was no hint of curiosity. Naruto was rather good at it. He was never too eager to learn anything. Even when he was asking things considered secrets, he never showed you how interested he was. Sometimes it made it difficult to tell if he was serious or not. Jiraiya had learned to just share or say he didn't have to know. If Naruto was asking, he wanted to know. It is about Uzu. He looked up. To see Naruto's reaction, there was nothing out of fashion. My ancestral home, Naruto said a bit lazily. There were many rumors going on about the land of whirlpools. The village had been reborn, but no one knew who did it and how it came to be. Suddenly one day, people just heard the rumors and the Wave Country confirmed it because they traded with the village. What bothered people was that the land was being led by the unknown, someone who was called the Emperor. No one has seen him, not even the people within the village. Considering how the village saw its end during the Second World War, I'm certain some people are very nervous. Naruto added, his blue eyes staring outside once more. Jiraiya nodded. The village had been destroyed. It hadn't done anything to anyone. The Uzumakis didn't fight in wars. They were a peaceful nation, but yet, they were powerful. People were nervous about their power and ended up plotting their complete destruction. Now, there were just remnants of the clan. But with the village restored, did it mean that there were many other survivors of the clan out there and they had regrouped? Iwagakure is the one that is most agitated, Jiraiya said. They are concerned because if really it is the Uzumaki, they might have an enemy with a grudge. That is one way to look at it, Naruto said. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. He would not forget, Naruto was Uzumaki. Even though he didn't live there, it was still his ancestral home and his mother had come from there. How would you look at it? Naruto shrugged indifferently. My clan was peaceful, they did not support wars, and they did not fight. They were allies of Konoha but never partook in the wars. They didn't start trouble with anyone. They were hidden in their village, minding their own business, and yet some people felt threatened by them and decided to destroy them. What would you feel about that, sensei? There was no anger, no emotion, nothing in Naruto's tone. Again, Jiraiya couldn't tell what Naruto thought. As those blue orbs glanced back him, there was a hint of curiosity in how he would respond to the question. It is a difficult one, but you cannot say that what Iwa and its allies was just. It was wrong in every sense of the word. Yet, nothing was done, not even by Konoha. Again, Naruto looked outside the window. Our world isn't fair at times, sensei. People with power always do what they please. Sometimes, right is decided by those with power. I know that, believe me, I know. There was bitterness in Jiraiya's tone. This is why it is my desire to change this world, he said with burning passion. I admire your passion, sensei. I'm sure my father shared it as well. Of course, Jiraiya said with a grin. It is why he named you after the hero of my first book after all. Ah, yes, that book. You said my father liked it. I think I like it as well, perhaps for different reasons, but Naruto wouldn't say. What would you have done in that situation, sensei? In a world you desire, would you have allowed Iwa and its allies to get away with what they did? Their action was nothing but a slaughter of innocents. I say this not because it is my clan, but looking at it as someone who has listened to your desires. Jiraiya thought for a couple of moments before shaking his head. I don't know, Naruto. Iwa would say they were justified and they wouldn't back down. Anything more forceful would result in bloodshed. He said. But if you have listened me too, you will know that I still don't have answers. Naruto nodded. Which is indeed a pity, the blonde said. What of Kiri? They are the ones should be most worried. Kiri is a bit far and we don't generally go there. It was locked up in a civil war. But I heard that the war was over and that a new cage has been named. I'll go there sometime. Jiraiya said. Naruto didn't say anything else on the subject, he just nodded and asked. What is new in the information you received? Nothing much, there are still many things we don't know. Getting inside is near impossible. I'd have to go there myself. But since it is something that will require time, I can't do it now. I would have to be away from you for a long time, and there are dangerous spies get killed there, Jiraiya explained lightly. I want to focus on our training now. But I am checking Iwa's movements. What are they doing? Nothing as things stand, but they are watching. I wouldn't bet against them preparing naval forces to prepare for an invasion if they feel they might be attacked. Kill them first before they kill you, Naruto said. It was the cold truth. Jiraiya could only grunt in response. What would you do if it came to that? Naruto took his time before responding. I don't know, he said. You said we'd do a mission when we leave. The Sannin nodded. Are you ready? He asked. But let me correct you, I never said, we. Naruto looked at the Sannin curiously. Why don't I like the sound of that? Jiraiya smiled. There is nothing to worry about. Otogaku. Kukukukukukuku. Orochimaru laughed with throbbing joy, seeing Sasuke fight. He was sitting on his throne. The Uchiha was excelling and moving faster than he had anticipated. He had been right after all and the Uchiha was a good candidate. But then again, he was never wrong was he. He was usually right because he made calculated moves. Kimimaro had turned out a failure because of his illness but Sasuke was perfect. The Sharingan would finally be within his grasp and he would make sure that the body would last him. It was a pity he could not sit Sasuke on a chair, strap him up and then begin to bisect him to an up close to what actually happened inside the Uchiha's body. Well, he just had to be patient. He would do it once he gained the body. He didn't have a problem with cutting himself up. Orochimaru went through a fit of coughs coupled up with blood. He frowned. This body had reached its limits. He really needed another host. He couldn't move freely now. And very soon, he would be bedridden, unable to do anything. Kabuto walked up to him, medicine. Dutifully, the nin gave him his medicine before glancing at Sasuke who was fighting in the hall. He is improving splendidly, he said. Should we inform him of Naruto-kun's improvements as well? Orochimaru shook his head. Let us leave that for now. It might come in handy as a form of motivation, he said. Did you bring what I asked for? Kabuto nodded. I've also found something interesting that you might like to know, he said lifting up his glasses. Orochimaru eyed Kabuto. Was he being teased? If the man knew he was going to like it, why didn't he just say it? Kabuto was loyal but sometimes Orochimaru questioned it. He smiled. What is it? It was appears that Gurren has once more surfaced in Uzushiogakure. Orochimaru blinked. Oh, that was indeed an interesting piece of information. His former number 2 had vanished from him along with that boy. He hadn't bothered chasing after them because they were no longer useful. Gurren had done what he needed her to do. Perhaps the only thing she could prove was that of danger to him was about what she knew. Well, she has been gone for about a year now, and nothing has happened, so he thought he was safe. That aside, he hadn't thought she had gone to join another village. Well, that could be troublesome since we don't know anything about the village, Orochimaru finally said after weighing up his thoughts. Have you sent someone? Yes, but they didn't come back. Well, it is interesting, Orochimaru. I could go myself, but at this point, I need to be by your side. A bitter reminder that he did need Kabuto at this moment. His movements were limited and very soon, he wasn't going to be able to do any by himself. The medicine wasn't for anything but pain. He couldn't stop the rot. So long as his soul remained here, the body would continue to break apart and he would experience the pain. Why didn't Kabuto just leave him? He shook his head. He needn't think about such things. There is something I have prepared, but I'd rather not use it unless there is no other choice. I am not going to be like this forever anyway, but if Gurren was here, I'd take her body and continue to nurture Sasuke-kun until he is ripe for the taking, the Sannin said. Call him. Kabuto nodded and called Sasuke. The stoic-looking Uchiha walked up to the two, his fully matured Sharingan glaring at the pathetic-looking Sannin with so much coldness that it filled Orochimaru with joy. What? I have a mission for you. I'm finally leaving this cage, Sasuke said as he accepted a scroll from Kabuto. Everything is in there, Orochimaru said. It is merely a test of your strength. I want to see if you can succeed smoothly before changing tactics for your training. River Country. Naruto sitting under a tree in a meditative position with his eyes firmly fixed on Jiraiya. The Sannin was sitting there with him. Plans were drawn on the ground. Naruto had already surveyed everything while Jiraiya watched. The Sannin hadn't commented and said he would not comment. Even if Naruto was making a mistake in something, he would not say anything, not until the mission was over. The Sannin had said he had to make sure no innocent person died, and if it happened, he would have to live with it because that was what happened. The village close to them was being occupied by criminals, scums who were here for the loot. The village of Takumi has sent for help and they had to remove the scums. Naruto had to do everything by himself. There were 30 enemies, but they were mostly just bandits. 10 were shinobi, but nothing strong that would cause him trouble. The danger here was that he had to make sure that they didn't kill the village people. If he made the wrong move, they would kill them and the mission would be a failure. The leaders of the group were all located in a small bar having a meeting. This was a perfect opportunity to strike, when all leaders were at one place. 7 were doing patrols around the village. He could easily handle those with his clones and silently as well. 5 were guarding the daughter of the village leader who they were demanding a ransom for. These people were in different locations and he had to strike quickly. The rest of the villagers were in their homes. They were told not to make moves. For some reason, Jiraiya had leaked that Takumi had hired shinobi and he had to deal with people who were aware that an enemy was coming. Remember Naruto, if you just leave this people, they are going to harm more people. If there was a mass jail for criminals, we'd capture them and send them there, but we don't have that. Killing is part of the job. Don't make it feel natural for you. It's not natural. Life is precious, but as shinobi, we cannot avoid it. You don't always have to kill. You have to determine what is safer. Naruto had shed blood before. It had been horrible. He hadn't meant to do it. The man was a bandit and Naruto had put too much strength on his hands, he had ended up snapping his neck. That sickening crack when the head twisted, those eyes rolling with life disappearing, they had haunted him, but Jiraiya had been there. Jiraiya was taking him through this, just to prepare him, just to make sure that he would not freeze and risk the lives of innocent people locked up in their homes. At any moment now, these people were going to round up the villagers and use them as shields to deter shinobi from attacking. This was why Naruto had to move now. I know, sensei. Naruto said. Wish me luck. Just use your head. This isn't a battle that can be won because of physical prowess. You might have the power and still lose. Just know that you sometimes have to put aside all that power and use a kunai to get the job done. Naruto nodded. He stood up. 2 minutes. He said. A minute is more than enough for you. Jiraiya said. You have your shadow clones to help you. Since the enemy is weak, that is more than enough. But 2 minutes it is. Naruto stood up and jumped onto a tree. He would have preferred to just walk into the small village and crush the enemy, but he had to be subtle about things. There were not more than 15 houses here. It was a mining village. But the gold had run out. The bandits didn't know. Imagine their disappointment when they found out. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto created 7 clones to deal with the bandits standing guard. He created 11 more to guard the houses where people were locked. The 5 guarding the important girl were inside as with the leaders, so he could get rid of the others without them noticing. Once his clones dispelled after completing their duties, Naruto ran. His movements were as smooth as a gentle breeze. He didn't make a sound as he danced through the rooftops before suddenly landing behind a group of 4 bandits. Hey WH. He didn't allow them to say anything. He moved in the blink of an eye, jumping over the man. As he was doing so, 3 kunais were flung in 3 different directions. The kunais hit straight on the foreheads of their targets. They pierced through. He landed on the man's shoulders, and placed his hand over the man's mouth to stop him from screaming. The others dropped to the ground, before he hit the man on the back of his head, knocking him out cold. The villagers would deal with him. Naruto left a clone to tie him up before disappearing along with small gusts of wind. The house he appeared in was a double-story house. His target was upstairs with her 5 guards. There were 10 downstairs, drinking while placing guards. They were laughing merrily while the villagers cried in their houses. There was no hope for tomorrow. They were thinking, at any moment now, they would be killed. Cold-hearted humans. But he had seen it, hadn't he? The ugliness of people. He had experienced it too, so he could understand. Naruto went behind the house and walked through the wall. He peeked through the window. The girl looked fine. She was small, crawled up in a corner, trembling in fear, tears in her eyes. People were truly ugly, weren't they? A little girl, an innocent child, and you did that to her. He had been innocent too. A child, younger than she was, and ugly people had tormented him. He needed to get in silently and time was ticking away. He held a single hand sign and used Shunshin to appear in the room. 5 kunais were in his hands. He twisted speedily and threw them all, each hitting its target. The bandits didn't see a damn thing. They fell lifelessly on the floor. Naruto walked over to the girl and knelt down. He gave her a warm smile and whispered something to her ear. He noticed she tensed. She was afraid. He created a clone which picked her up and left by the window. Naruto stood up. He was done with this part. He took out a smoke bomb and went downstairs. He threw the ball on the round table the 10 were gathered around. It went off, quickly covering the room with smoke. Everything else occurred within seconds and Naruto walked out safely with his hands inside his pockets. He could consider his mission done and dusted. He just had to interrupt a meeting, and with everyone else gone, he didn't have to worry about the safety of the civilians, but the clones would still keep watch of everything. Naruto had manners, unlike a certain pervert. So he actually knocked when he arrived at the door where the leaders of the bandits were gathered. He knocked gently a couple of times before a large man walked up. He dwarfed his frame by sizable proportions. Even a Chunin would be afraid to face such a man whose face was a field of scars. What? The man demanded, glaring at Naruto. He then noticed the headband. They sent a brat. A brat. He looked insulted for a moment. Naruto didn't say anything. His response was to punch the man on his face. Despite his size, the man was sent flying back inside the room. He crashed loudly onto a wall, face bleeding, teeth falling out. He cursed loudly as he staggered to get up to his feet. Naruto stepped into the room. They were all large, ugly men. They were the kind of perverts of liked little girls. Pedophiles. He counted them calmly before greeting them. They were not even the least surprised or alarmed. As large as the man he had punched, he was simply a doorman. Konoha shinobi, one of the men frowned, looking at the forehead protector Naruto wore. Is it true, I've had even though young, Leaf's shinobi are strong, one asked quietly. We are about to find out. They all readied themselves, grinning madly. He was just one, they were big and strong. They could handle this, or so they believed. Between mob justice and quick deaths, what do you prefer? Naruto asked in a calm tone. But a mob justice was no good, was it? Maybe the villagers would pay back the people who made them suffer, but it did nothing but incite violence in the hearts of people. Naruto nodded to himself. Although he offered that option, he wasn't going to go with it. Innocent people didn't need to dirty their hands. This was the duty of a shinobi. We pick neither option. The first one lunged towards him, attempting to plant the base of his foot on his face. Naruto sidestepped the large foot and raised his right hand, channeling chakra through it. He made a fast motion as if he was cutting something and then blood gushed over from the man's knee. His leg was cut off from his knee. When the pain shot through, he cried painfully. "You little fucker." Another yelled, swinging a right hook. Naruto caught the man on his arm, having avoided the punch. Chakra was channeled through his fingers and he pressed. There was a sickening crack or bones breaking. The man cried out in pain while gritting his teeth. When the last man hovered behind him, Naruto slammed his elbow on the man's chest, knocking on the wind of his lungs. He was a shinobi, and he had to finish this. He took out 4 kunais from his pouch and did what he had to do. Once done, he breathed in and out to calm his nerves. He didn't need to see anything. He simply walked out and made way for it. Jiraiya could handle the rest. They just needed to do what he did and mission complete. The village would be safe. Minutes later, Jiraiya walked up to Naruto. "I can't complain," he said of Naruto's performance. "You okay?" "Yeah," Naruto said with a grunt. "Where to now? I doubt we are going to be staying here. Takumi to collect our payment, you know someone has to pay for our living expenses," Jiraiya said. "We will stay in the village for a couple of days before deciding where we will go." "I have to wait for something." "Our payment?" Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. "It is my payment, sensei, and we are not sharing. I'm the one who found the mission, and we are a team. Takumi hired both of us and they will pay both of us," Jiraiya said. "You should have asked the terms before you did anything." "Well, I can always tell them that you didn't do anything and don't need to get paid." Naruto offered. "I'm sure they'd believe me." "You wouldn't." Naruto smiled. "Of course not, I wouldn't do something like that to my beloved perverted sensei." Chapter 2. When Naruto first met the Biju inside of him, he had been truly frightened, not of those huge eyes or its size but the sheer amount of hatred those eyes directed at his presence. He was surely just an insignificant person the Biju could squash under its massive paws, yet it could look at him with so much hate that his body trembled. Naruto had never felt something so powerful. Over the years, he has learned that it wasn't him specifically who was hated but humans in general. The poor beast was forced to remain caged because of its power. It was a sad thing. Of course, Naruto didn't pity the beast. He didn't hate it either. As he gently touched the waters, those huge eyes opened slightly. Naruto marveled the size of the Biju, its intelligence. People were missing out by simply brushing out the Biju as nothing more than a source of power, a weapon of destruction. Chaos incarnated. Those eyes, I wonder if you stared at my mother as you do with me. She never visited. Kurama responded calmly. Unlike with you, her seal was simply designed to suppress my power. The same can be said about Mito. So they all never used your power but just kept you at bay. The Shodai's words were like he has nothing against me but I was too powerful to be left alone. So his wife sealed me within her. I have been confined for years, you thinking of ending my term? A toothy grin. Naruto smiled. Yes, those attempts. The Biju always attempted to entice him to let it go. To free it so it can finally breathe in the oxygen it has been deprived of for many years. But Naruto wasn't stupid. He wasn't going to do it. Releasing the Biju meant his death. He did not have the full genes of the Uzumaki to survive an extraction as his mother did. My clan was also destroyed for being too powerful. I guess we have something in common there. Naruto said. But that isn't why I am here. My power, Kurama said. Naruto was like all humans. He wanted his power. He was the first Jinchuriki to use his power but it did give him a sense of freedom. The seal held him. If Naruto was willing, he could draw out as much chakra as he was willing to give. Naruto nodded. I wish to learn to control it once more. Kurama grinned. I thought after you nearly killed that hermit when you lost control you wouldn't want to try again. Naruto shrugged. It would be stupid of me to leave this power like this. You are strong and I am your host. It doesn't matter that neither of us had a choice in our union, the fact is we are together and I am going to learn to control your chakra. I'm not stopping you. Yes, because when I use the chakra, the seal weakens. I have been studying seals since I was 7. Although the old man never taught me anything special, he introduced me to Fuinjutsu and said it was the legacy of the name I carry. So I know what happens with this seal and I know you laugh gleefully when I lose control. Kurama stared at the blonde for a moment before laughing menacingly. You lose control because you can't handle my chakra human. Naruto shook his head. Yes, your chakra is potent and admittedly deadly to the human body, but it isn't the potency of your chakra that makes me lose control, it is the hatred. Kurama stared. If you can't handle it, then don't try to use it. I am hatred, it comes with my chakra. But you can make it worse because you want me to lose control. Naruto stressed those words. Look up. Kurama did and saw structures. He frowned. He knew the seal. Naruto clapped his hands. You are very knowledgeable about seals. Then again, you have always been sealed within seal masters, he said. That is insurance. You are not going anywhere unless I say you are. If more than 6 tails of chakra leak out the seal, that falls down on you and restrains you. With that said, it would be much simpler for both of us if you allowed me to use your chakra without doing anything funny that interferes with the process. A human, doing this to him. A child no less. It was humiliating. I have no plans on remaining here until you decide to transfer me to another host. I will make my escape. I know you will try. I'd try to escape too if I was locked up in a cage, but I still won't let you go. I need your power. I know you hate humans. If you force your way out of the seal, you're likely to kill me first and then incinerate my body just to make sure I stay dead. But let us make a deal that gives you a bit of freedom. Of course, you'll still be locked, but the seal is special and we can work out something. Naruto's eyes snapped open. They sharpened when saw Jiraiya's foot heading straight towards his face. It was too close for comfort and he didn't want to get any unnecessary hits. He quickly fell backwards, lifting up his face while he raised both his hands. As Jiraiya's foot passed above him, he caught him just above his ankle. The Sannin raised both his hands up, surrendering. Naruto let go of the Sannin. Why are you attacking me? You were open, Jiraiya said with a shrug. Naruto stared. Is that how we are going to play it, sensei? If one is open we attack them. It's not a game but it's a one-way street exercise. I am the master and you are the student here, Jiraiya said firmly. He was certainly uncomfortable with the idea of Naruto being given the license to attack him if he was open. That's not fair, Naruto said. Here is my rule. To determine that you are still worthy to train me, I will attack you if you are open. I see no value if being helped on by someone weaker than me. Jiraiya stared. You still got a long way to go, brat, the Sannin said. He sighed and sat down next to the blonde. They were still in the river country. It has been a week and he already had plans. He would have liked to start with other things but there was something he had to do and it was important. Not to mention he still needed to see Tsunade. The woman had been forceful in her letter. He had to go before attending other agent matters that needed him and he couldn't do them with Naruto. But even if he was to leave Naruto, it wasn't going to be much of a problem for the training the blonde had to go through. Naruto did his own training when it came to ninjutsu. Even as his sensei, he only informed Naruto of the basics and the blonde did everything on his own. When they do get to fire, he would only teach Naruto the basics and a jutsu he knew. The blonde would learn everything by himself. He trained Naruto with taijutsu, kenjutsu and some genjutsu. Naruto was not that good with the latter, so they'd shelved it and focused on simply being able to negate them. Troubled, Jiraiya glanced at Naruto for a moment before shaking his head. No, he said. I was just sorting out my thoughts. What were you doing anyway? When you interrupted me, Naruto started. I was having a delightful conversation with the Kyuubi regarding the use of its chakra. You'd loosened the seal before to allow me to draw out as much chakra as possible but there were massive negative consequences to this. Jiraiya frowned. He still hadn't even told Tsunade about the incident. She would freak out, possibly question why Naruto even needed to learn to use the Kyuubi's power. But he believed it was necessary. Why have so much power inside of you and not learn to use it? Besides, with the way Minato designed the seal, it was designed for Naruto to control the power. The key was for this purpose. The cage could still be unlocked while keeping the Kyuubi sealed. However, if Naruto was consumed by the power, the Kyuubi got free. Don't remind me about those consequences. The toads won't give me the key again after that incident, the Sannin grumbled. They'd questioned his decision. Well, he had been close to dying and releasing the Kyuubi at that time. If he had died, the Kyuubi would have escaped. Jiraiya laughed bitterly at the thought. It would have been a ridiculous end to his miserable life if his last deed was unleashing a hateful Biju into this world. It would surely leave a trail of destruction on its path and who would be blamed for it? Most of all, Naruto would be gone. he would have ended Minato's legacy. Naruto shrugged at this. He didn't need the key at this point. He had already copied it and memorized it. Without seeing it, he wouldn't be able to recreate it because the lock was hidden and the seal itself was worthy of Uzumaki. For greatness, we must be willing to take risks, sensei. If everything came easy, things would be different. Naruto said. My conversation with the Biju centered on it allowing me to use its chakra freely. Of course, I can still use it freely, but when forced and taken in its raw nature, it leads to situations we'd both rather avoid. Jiraiya was silent for a couple of moments. Did it say yes? Of course not. The Biju wants to leave the cage, Naruto said with a shake of his head. Even so, I still want to learn to control its power. We are fine with at least 2 tails, but anything more than that, it becomes a problem. I'm okay with that, but you must understand that power alone doesn't determine things, Naruto. You can control the power of the Kyuubi and still be unable to do anything. Naruto smiled. Sensei, you should know there is such a thing as soft power. Believe me, I know and understand it. Orochimaru doesn't use his physical prowess to entice his mad followers, he speaks to them, a language they can understand. That is politics. But the power of words cannot be underestimated. You can change things with words. You can influence how people look at things with your words. But as shinobi, there comes a time when words cannot save your life or protect what you value. That is where this power comes into play, don't you think so, sensei? Jiraiya nodded. Sometimes Naruto spoke volumes. Sometimes he spoke like someone who was much older. But he was just a brat. And of course, these were just moments. That is correct, I see sensei taught you valuable lessons in life. It was necessary, Naruto said with his eyes closed. The villagers glared at me with contempt, they said things in whispers and it crushed me. There were no jutsus there and yet my life could have been destroyed. That is just one practical example of how words can change things. The bitter days that he hadn't seen much of, Jiraiya cursed his cowardice. Had he been a little courageous, he would have bothered trying with Naruto, but he did not. Even when he came, he watched from afar. His sensei had asked him, "When are going to introduce yourself to Naruto?" It didn't have to be anything related to his parents. The third was his beloved master. Naruto could have understood without too many questions. But he hadn't. He had said he couldn't do anything good. Sensei was really good to you, huh? There was sadness in his eyes. Naruto nodded. He was my family, he said and paused. A minute passed before he spoke again. When do we begin? Jiraiya gathered his thoughts for a moment. He gave Naruto a scroll and explained. This contains what you need in order to learn how to convert your chakra into fire before learning to use fire-based jutsus. Like what you did when you learned to bend wind. Naruto shook his head. He returned the scroll back to Sannin. I know how to that. Jiraiya blinked. When did you learn? You have never even tried using fire-based jutsus when sparring with me. You always use wind. About a year ago, Naruto said with a shrug. I have been putting focus on learning to use wind chakra and controlling the air around me. This requires maximum focus. I couldn't allow myself to be preoccupied with something else. More than a year and he never said a word. Not a damn word. But then again, given that shrug, it was apparent that he didn't take it as something serious. You still don't know any fire-based jutsus. I have a good memory, I most certainly remember the hand signs you have used for your jutsus. But I haven't tried it, yet. Again, a nonchalant shrug. Jiraiya understood why Naruto never said anything. He didn't want to start learning to use fire-based jutsus at that time. We can't start your training now. The one about the Kyuubi. Why? We have to go our separate ways, Jiraiya said. I have some things to do and will be traveling a lot. You have to go to Tsunade and try to finish your wind training there. The environment is very conducive there. I will send you a message once we are done and we can talk about concluding things. Last time I checked we didn't have a good relationship with the Hidden Sand. Suna had invaded the Leaf and they had ended up fighting. He had fought and defeated Suna's Jinchuriki. Had Konoha had bad leaders, it would have certainly marched to decimate the sand. But good leaders avoided such bloodshed and were working on something else. That has been resolved, Jiraiya said. Tsunade soothed things out, but there are still some people who are wary. They did betray us, they can do it again. At least some people are thinking that. Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment. Then I must confirm how things are there before they take things to the next level. My training is nothing more than convenience. Jiraiya grinned. You're not a bad student, he said. Kakashi always spoke about reading underneath the underneath, Naruto said with a shake of his head. The desert is going to be unpleasant. If you get caught in a sandstorm. But it should be fine. You can always consider it a training trip. You really do like trial by fire sensei. You threw me in a deep pit to get me to learn how to summon the toads, Naruto stared. One of these days sensei, you'll be drunk and wake up sleeping next to the old hag while posing. Jiraiya shivered at the thought of Tsunade seeing him before her when waking up. She'd kill him this time around. Let us not go that far, he said nervously. I sent a message to the Subaku family to inform them of your visit. I thought it would be suitable they know. Naruto nodded and looked up into the sky. I'll camp by the border tonight and enter the desert before the sun rises. He said. Don't try to learn using the Kyuubi's power there. We don't want you accidentally leveling Tsunagakure to the ground. Jiraiya said. He could actually see that happening. The Kyuubi had enough firepower to do that. The only way he had managed to even survive was through suppressing the chakra. If not for Fuinjutsu, he would be dead, literally. We shall see. Naruto responded with a shrug of his shoulders. A day later. Hidden village in sand. Traveling documents, those were essential. If you were going to walk through the gates of any hidden village, you needed them. It didn't matter if you were wearing a headband or just a civilian, you needed papers that showed who you were and where you come from. Security reasons. They didn't just want everyone and anyone entering their villages. Spies and dangerous criminals could walk through the gates if not watched, and that posed a serious risk to a village. Naruto looked up into the sky. This was his first visit in this village. He didn't know where to turn to. He didn't know anything. Perhaps this was why Jiraiya had contacted the Subaku family. Naruto didn't actually need them to get by. He could ask around. The wind around the village was pleasant though, a gentle breeze, a warm kiss of nature. It was unlike the desert. The wind was wild, untamed, a natural force of destruction. Certainly something that could destroy you. Listening to its whispers, how it caressed his skin, Naruto was tempted to dance right here and now with his bag hanging on his back. Someone hit him on the shoulder. That just ruined the mood. It felt like the wind suddenly disappeared on him. He looked at the man who had hit him, an apologetic smile. Naruto nodded and the man hurried somewhere. A minute later, 2 more people passed by him running. Naruto shook his head. A village may have different name, culture and environment, but people were still the same. He started moving once more and finally found a room to rent, for a month-long stay. There was no hurry to see the Subaku siblings. He wasn't even sure how it would go considering that the last time he met them he had been battling Gaara. Well, at least it had ended up pleasantly. Naruto placed his bag on the bed and turned towards the window. His calling, it was high up in the wall. He frowned. He stepped next to the wall and placed his hand on it. He blinked before smiling. He almost laughed. He was thinking of creating a window that suited his needs. Was he that obsessive about this? Naruto shook his head. The window was probably up there because of the conditions in the village. If storms came, they had to be safe. He placed his hands up and climbed up onto the window. He couldn't sit the way he preferred given the size of the walls, but it would do. Once settled, Naruto looked outside. It wasn't a pleasant view. Then again, he never visited the window for its view. 2 hours went by before Naruto was snapped out of his thoughts by a knock on the door. He thought about ignoring it for a moment. His sentimental time was being disturbed. Silently shaking his head, and went down and walked over to the wall. A young girl, who showed him the room, was standing there, with a warm smile. Sorry to disturb you, but I just wanted to see if would take your food here or if you would eat downstairs. Jiraiya was going to shout and curse, but Naruto would only smile. He was renting a room in a 5-star hotel. The Sannin would cry foul over his wasted money. Naruto was usually safe with the money the Sannin gave him. He rarely spent it all and the man was more than happy to take it back. So, just this once, he could live the life of a spoiled prince. I will come downstairs. He said. Can I also get a small table I can use to write on? I will speak to the manager about that. Thank you. The young lady gave him the eating schedule and before walking away. Naruto closed the door behind him and sighed. He should ease the tensions he felt on his body. Traveling in the heat of the desert is a bit rough. He would rest his body today and would go out tomorrow for training. Hidden leaf. A bandaged Jiraiya was sitting by the window, with a frown on his lips. Naruto didn't do this to him. But Tsunade had to greet him by pummeling him. He couldn't do his job with his body in pain. It would be troublesome if he came across trouble when his body was still suffering from the effects of Tsunade's beatings. Well, he was used to it anyway. I can't believe you damn pervert. Tsunade sent a harsh glare towards her former teammate. Jiraiya moved slightly. He was ready to bolt through the window if Tsunade made a move. One beating was enough, he couldn't take another one. I just couldn't help myself, Harem. When I came in, I felt that I was being called. Being called my ass. Tsunade didn't ease up on her glare. For more than 2 years you don't come show up, and when you finally do appear, the first thing you do is go on a peeping tour. He didn't bother coming to see her. He didn't come through the gates. If it wasn't because of the complaints she had received, she wouldn't have known he was in the village until he decided that he was ready to see her. Didn't he know that she had missed him? Not that, she would even admit that to him. He would never stop reminding her about it. There was also too much to talk about that could not be said through letters. It has been over 2 years, damn it. I was going to come, Harem, Jiraiya said lamely. But you didn't have to beat me like that and then tear my scripts. I'd been working on that for some time, he complained with a glare. Tsunade shrugged carelessly. I should be having someone remove all those images in your head. She said. Jiraiya wouldn't permit something like that, he would fight tooth and nail to avoid it. Naruto let him do his research peacefully as long as he took care of everything that the blonde needed. Sneaking in was a good idea though. He was already banned in most places. He just wished Tsunade wouldn't have her Anbu try to monitor him while in the village. They were not a problem, but it would just create an unnecessary problem for him. Anyway, Tsunade turned serious. What did Naruto say when you said you were going to come here? For a moment, Jiraiya thought of lying, but he chose not to do so. He wouldn't do that to Tsunade. Nothing, he said. Tsunade was silent for a few moments. At this point, it was getting dangerous, but she didn't want to get suspicious or cast doubts around Naruto. But he could not mope around forever. Or maybe he wasn't moping around but just had nothing to say. He hasn't had very good memories in Konoha. They certainly didn't give him anything. As far as she knew, the only good thing that had occurred for him in this village was when they cheered for him after he won his match at the Chunin exams. But that was the only thing. All other memories were bad, and the Sandame's former advisors seemed particularly worried about this. Then again, they dined with Danzo. There was always an ulterior motive. But they kept disturbing her about Naruto's return to the Leaf. She certainly didn't want him to spend more years in the wilderness. She was sure he would be here when needed, but the Leaf didn't need another Jiraiya. I was thinking that perhaps he would have said something, Tsunade said in a measured tone. He doesn't talk much about anything personal. We get along just fine and I think he is fine, but we do need to start talking about these issues. Then again, it seems that unless I bring up something we won't talk about it unless it has something to do with training. But he does talk when the subjects come up. Jiraiya nodded his head. He isn't a silent person when you are talking to him, but he can be very silent. He does this thing where he can sit motionlessly for hours like he is a statue. There was a bit of indifference about the way Jiraiya said those words. He even shrugged in the end. Why don't you sound concerned about it? It isn't a problem, he said. I think it is done out of habit. Tsunade was silent for a couple of moments. She couldn't get any reports the Anbu made on their observations of Naruto. There was a register that said someone was observing him, but there were no records of it. Not in this office, not in the Sarutobi compound, not in Anbu HQ, and she didn't know who was doing it. Well, she had succeeded her sensei. If it was something dangerous, he would have made sure to keep it for himself only. The training is going fine. I assume you don't really give a clear picture in your reports. Everything is going fine. If we end up taking more time, I will talk to the Toads about teaching him senjutsu. But I will see what happens in the coming months. Forget senjutsu, why are you talking like you are going to spend more time away from the village, Jiraiya? You have to start talking about coming back now. There is a limit to how much I can tolerate this. I will talk to Naruto about it, but I did mention that we would have to talk about concluding things, the Sannin said. Tsunade stared at the man. He didn't sound concerned and he wasn't saying they would come back. You're not concerned, are you? You are happy you are spending time with your godson and are able to do some good for your past failures. Jiraiya smiled bitterly. That might be true. It may be selfish on my part, but I am doing something good here. Naruto is learning and he will become a great asset to Konoha. It isn't like there is anything that really needs him here, so he can afford to focus on his training, Jiraiya responded in a tone filled with regrets. I will talk to him about it. Let us just give it one more year, Harem. Tsunade sighed. The issue with Uzu is becoming a problem. Naruto is Uzumaki and his continued absence in the village is troubling to some people and to me really. If there are survivors of the Uzumaki clan there, would he decide to go there or would he come back to this village that has done nothing but treat him with contempt? Jiraiya frowned. He avoided thinking about this issue. He didn't want to question Naruto's loyalties. His sensei had never said anything about Naruto being a flight risk. But this was what Tsunade was basically saying. He could understand from her position. There was also the Kyuubi to think about. What are some people plotting? I don't know as yet, but they will eventually. She sighed tiredly. Who could have thought that the revival of one small village could unsettle things so much? Well, you could understand why it was destroyed in the first place. Our world depends on bijus to balance power, but they had the power of making possessing bijus worthless. The Uzumaki's sealing prowess was something that we can never see in this world. Jiraiya said. If they have come back, now you start questioning, are they going to come for us? A paranoid person like Danzo will also be thinking, will they also look at Konoha? Why would they turn to us if they have indeed revived? Konoha did nothing after Uzu was destroyed. Nothing. Mito was married to the first Hokage. We carry their symbol on our shinobi vests. Kushina was sent to this village for the sole purpose of becoming a Jinchuriki. And yet, when their village was destroyed, we did nothing. Tsunade frowned. That just raises a new problem. We will deal with it when it comes. But if we are looking at it in that way, they have a lot of enemies. She said. We still don't know anything, so best we wait. Have you been able to determine Naruto's standing in this? Jiraiya shook his head. No, he said. He asks questions when talking about it and poses some things that get me thinking, but always does it objectively, not as Uzumaki. Naruto did that often. He didn't reveal his opinion on most things despite his willingness to engage him in any subject. You have to find out what he thinks, Tsunade said. What do you have on Sasuke? He follows Orochimaru closely, but I think he has been around Otogakure in the past months. We never saw him anywhere. Orochimaru is the one who has been rather silent. Tsunade looked thoughtful for a moment. Since he has to change hosts every 3 years, we can assume that his current host is starting to wear out. So he is limiting his movements, she said. This would be a good moment as any to apprehend him. Jiraiya nodded. But we don't know where he is. Otogakure is a massive web of hideouts. If you go to one, Orochimaru will know and escape. You really can't move unless you know exactly where he is. I expect you to find out soon before he takes Sasuke's body. I personally don't care for the brat, but we can't allow Orochimaru to have him. I'm going to be looking around for the next couple of weeks. I will come with something, at least I hope. What of Naruto? I didn't tell you. I sent him to Tsunade. He will be there for at least a month. If he didn't stop by the desert to train, he should have arrived already. Jiraiya said. You could have said when you came here, Jiraiya, Tsunade said with a shake of her head. How long are you going to stay here? I will be gone by tomorrow morning. Jiraiya said. I have to do what I need to do quickly before meeting up with Naruto. I have given him a month. It will be best if I don't keep him waiting by taking too long. Tsunade. Naruto was in a training ground. It hadn't taken long for him to find it. The whispers of the wind were just too much for him to ignore. The wind just felt so natural, so gentle, so powerful. In the places he has been, he has had to use much of his chakra to generate wind jutsus, but here, you could control the wind itself. It was a difficult adventure, but nothing impossible. It could be done. You just had to learn to move with the wind and just be one with it. In this exercise, Naruto usually meditated and allowed himself to measure the speed and density of the wind. You could not simply wish to control something you did not understand and could not measure. He meditated for about 2 hours before standing up. He took a stance and breathed calmly, his breathing becoming silent, like an assassin. Once he had achieved this, Naruto lifted his hands up and then down again. He twisted around and the wind picked up. He jumped forward and the wind moved with him. He stopped and smiled. He didn't care that someone was watching him. It was only natural for them to observe his movements. He was still a leaf shinobi and maybe they had become allies once more, but he was using their training grounds without even talking to anyone in their ranks. And by now, they probably knew that he was a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. If they were willing to let their Jinchuriki run loose in Konoha, they'd think the leaf would do the same. Naruto shook his head. Wasn't it something that such thoughts hadn't disturbed his breathing? Then again, for how long has he been doing this? The days in the forest of death, the days sitting by the window of his apartment in the leaf. It has been long. Many years. It was only natural for him. But he had forgotten when he started hanging out with people. He shoved the thoughts to the back of his head and returned to his training. He waved his hand across his chest, picking up wind, this time around, with dust. He tried spinning it around, but it fell down. His concentration. Naruto stood motionlessly for a couple of minutes trying to regain his concentration. Once he was satisfied, he started moving. He waved both his hands, moving the gentle air around him. He needed to move with it. He started walking around along with the wind. He did jumps while controlling the wind, moving it with him. He did this for an hour before halting. Naruto waved his right hand front of him in a quick motion. His sand picked up, like a wave before it once more returned to the ground. Naruto clapped his hands together, while standing motionlessly. Sand picked up around him and then started twisting. It was like a small gentle storm. Naruto was moving around with the storm, dancing around the training ground. He stopped, with the dust returning to the ground, sweat on his forehead, breathing a bit labored. Temari stared at the blonde she had seen in Konoha. At first he had been unimpressive, just another brat, but then he did something she never thought would happen. He defeated her brother, even though Gaara had even transformed. It was something she could never forget. He had sacrificed himself that day. He could have died. Gaara could have killed him, but he defeated Gaara and returned her brother to her. Now he was standing there, looking at her. He had grown. He still looked slim. His hair was long, reaching over his shoulders, and it looked like it was never cut because it was messy, but it could be because of the dance he was doing. He was dressed long black pants and a black long-sleeved shirt with a swirling symbol in the front. He had truly grown, a bit of something to look at. That was impressive, Temari said, walking over to Naruto. Naruto shook his head. He had a small smile on his lips seeing the blonde Kunoichi. It was nothing, he said. Just requires a bit of concentration and energy. He paused. You don't have a problem if I sit down, do you? I am a little worn out. Then look. The exercise took out a lot from me. Temari shook her head. She glanced at him with a curious eye as he settled down. On first look, it appeared that you were controlling the sand, but that isn't it. Naruto glanced up at the blonde. Subaku no Temari. The eldest of the past Kage's children. As far as he was concerned, this village has yet to elect a Kage since Rasa was killed. This was the daughter of that man and a brother to the puppet user as well as Gaara. His memory of her was when she brutalized Tenten during the Chunin exams and looked irritated when Shikaku quit in their match. Oh yes, she did blush when she first saw Sasuke. What is so funny? Temari more or less demanded. Naruto shook his head. Sorry, I was thinking about something. When we first met, you blushed when you saw my former teammate. Temari sent the blonde a slight glare. She didn't want to be reminded of that moment. I thought he was good-looking and impressive, but he was a rude person, she said with a frown. Well, you looked delightful in person to look at first glance, but were rather brutal in your battle. Naruto said. First glances don't always reveal everything, do they? Temari looked away from a moment. He had just complimented her. When was the last time someone did that? Oh yeah, it almost never happened. She was the sister of a bloody killer. Even though Gaara had changed, to the people of this village, he was still the bloodthirsty killer who killed people just for looking at him, a bitter past that just didn't seem to stay away from them. She coughed once before responding. No, they are not. I brushed you off at first glance. You looked like some weak brat who was just playing shinobi with a headband. But you truly are impressive. No, you shocked me. I didn't think you'd be able to defeat my brother. Naruto smiled. Well, there is really nothing that is impossible, he said. Brother, you are speaking of him fondly. Last time you were truly afraid of him, I guess things really did change after my fight with him. Temari nodded with a smile. They did, I guess that is thanks to you, she said. I am a Jinchuriki, perhaps it is the territory, Naruto said. You really have a clean eye to be able to tell that I wasn't manipulating sand but rather wind. You were looking down on Tsunade's strongest wind user. Temari said proudly. Oh really? Naruto said curiously, a little charming smile on his lips. Temari thought he was mocking her. She looked at him sternly. What is with that response? Naruto shook his head. No offense, he said with both his hands in the air. He looked up in the sky. I have been around and I haven't come across anyone who says they are the best in their village when it comes to wind. Then again, I have mostly been dealing with civilians. I am also a wind user, as you saw, so that makes me curious. Temari stared, looking at him skeptically before finally accepting his response. Any reason you didn't to see us when we were expecting you? This is my first time in this village. Temari stared, unimpressed by Naruto's response. Are you trying to say that you didn't come because you don't know where we live? She asked, a bit rhetorically. And yet you still found a hotel to stay and even managed to make your way to a training ground, she paused. How stupid do you think I am? Naruto didn't respond to that trick question. I wanted to look around the village by myself without my hosts because it is my first time being here. Being able to navigate around unfamiliar places is important for shinobi. You're not always going to go to places you know. Temari was a bit embarrassed for her rant. She jumped to conclusions. She glanced at him at the corner of her eyes. He had his face staring at the sky, his eyes clear. She couldn't read anything from his face but he had stopped smiling. Sorry, it was truly difficult saying that. Naruto shook his head. I led you to it. He said. Temari stared at him for a moment trying to understand the meaning of those words. She couldn't figure it out, so she ended up just shaking her head. It would be of service to us if you came to our house, we are your hosts after all. I'm staying here for at least a month, besides that, I am more comfortable in my own private space, Naruto said calmly. But invite me tonight for dinner and I will come. Temari blinked. It usually goes the other way around, you know, she said. You can't always confine yourself to the norms, Naruto said with a shrug. He then held out his right hand. Temari looked at it for a moment before helping him stand up. I need to rest up a bit and do some reading, but before that, you won't have a problem showing me to your house, yes? He paused. Oh, you still haven't said you are inviting me. Temari smiled. He was certainly a bit weird. Then again, she didn't deal with people she casually talked to like this. You are invited, she said. Come on, she said and started walking away. Naruto walked by her side silently. He only spoke when they arrived at the streets of the village where people could see them. He noticed the reaction of the male population and glanced at Temari, who was walking normally as if nothing was wrong. I'm certain I will have people blocking my path when I go back to my hotel. Temari glanced at him for a moment before responding. Why? How often do you walk with a young man around here, Temari? Temari was caught off guard by the question. It took some time for her to stutter a response. Why are you asking that? Oh, Naruto smiled. Well, that reaction is a bit interesting. I'm guessing you don't do that. Surprised, I am truly surprised. I mean you are a beautiful woman, I thought both lustful and mad in love boys would be throwing themselves at you. Temari frowned. They can't do that. They are afraid, she paused, shaking her head. They are afraid of my brother. She didn't explain why. And thank you. For. Naruto knew why, he just wanted her to say it. She was a tough person but yet still innocent. And he was used to dealing with the perverts that Jiraiya surrounded himself with. Not only that, but in the bars he visited, he saw some crazy things. Alcohol was a mad demon. Temari sent Naruto a look. Naruto laughed, raising his hands. Forgive me for that, he said. I just thought it would be adorable if you said it yourself, he said. But there is no need to thank me. I am not giving you a favor by complimenting you. You just need to smile and appreciate it because that is the truth. He put on a thoughtful look for a moment before speaking again. Well, I can't think Gaara would compliment you and your other brother. Naruto shook his head. What of my other brother? Naruto shook his head. Nothing, he said. He didn't step into Temari's house, he just looked and then turned around to leave. Temari offered to walk him to his hotel but he shook his head. It was a gentleman's duty to walk a lady home. Her reaction had been a bit amusing once more. Later night. While there was no emotion in his face, Gaara was a little happy knowing that Naruto was going to come to have dinner with them. The blonde had told him some important words that changed the way he views life. He was content with his life as he was and the voices had died down. He could now sleep peacefully. It was perhaps safe to say he was at peace. He wouldn't go as far as to say he was happy but all was well. His siblings didn't look at him with fear and that was fine. He still needed to do a lot to change things for his past behavior. If people hated or fear him, he could understand. His actions hadn't been just and he could not excuse it by any reason. He had been wrong and he was working on to correct those wrongs. He could only thank Naruto for this change. Why didn't you invite him to come stay with us? Gaara asked his sister. He had returned a bit late. Training with Baki and meetings with people who couldn't stand before him without their knees trembling was exhausting and it took too much of his time. I did and he said he was fine being alone, Temari said. Alone? This word got her thinking. Naruto was like Gaara. He hadn't been batshit crazy, bloodthirsty and frightening, but he had been lonely. He didn't have family, and he hadn't had friends. A miserable existence. The fate of Jinchurikis wasn't pleasant and with what she saw with her own brother, she could understand. We do have enough room here, Gaara said. He couldn't understand why Naruto wouldn't want to come here. But if someone didn't want to do something, you didn't have to force them, lest you make them uncomfortable. Well, that is his decision, he said. Isn't it fine as things are? Kankuro said. The letter didn't say we had to give him a place to stay. That may be true, but we were asked to make him feel comfortable, and look out for him while in this village, Gaara said calmly. A woman who helped around the house came up with Naruto to the dining room. She then walked away. Temari realized, Naruto was dressed differently from earlier. He must have been wearing training clothes when she saw him during the day. And his hair didn't look out of place. Naruto, please come through, Gaara's voice snapped Temari out of her thoughts. Naruto nodded. There was little emotion in Gaara's voice, you couldn't even tell if he was smiling or not if you didn't look properly like an experienced shinobi. Temari had a smile and Kankuro looked bored. He must be thinking about developing new skills for his puppets, a rare trait of skills for the hidden sand. He sat down next to the bored-looking man and faced Gaara. Thank you for welcoming me to your home, he said. Gaara shook his head. You helped me, this is nothing, he said calmly. Family dinner. Naruto never had this. He had eaten with the Sandaime there and then, but it was not dinner with his blood family. He would never get this chance unless he forms a family of his own. What a miserable existence this was. Although he had said Temari could invite him, he was suddenly feeling a bit out of place. He wasn't used to this. He rarely even ate with Jiraiya. He really had to stop putting himself into things when he would have difficulty carrying them out. But he still couldn't let his discomfort show. He had to play his part. He couldn't make this awkward. He tried but he didn't speak much for the first couple of moments. He responded to questions until they finished eating and they moved to another room. How are things in Konoha anyway? Gaara asked quietly. Naruto shook his head. I actually haven't been in the Leaf in more than 2 years, he said. 3 siblings were surprised. The letter they received didn't say anything and neither had really gone to the Leaf since the invasion. It was a difficult time between the villages with negotiations between carried out over their actions in the invasion. But at least that was settled. Why? Naruto looked at Temari who'd asked. Training trip, he said with indifference. She was still surprised. You haven't been home for that long and you've been just training. What else have you been doing? You know, traveling around. The world is huge, there are many places to visit, that is why it is trip, Naruto explained lightly. I didn't think you'd need to train more, you were already strong even when you were a genin, Gaara said. Naruto shook his head. I did not defeat you because I was stronger than you. You cannot think that. I defeated you because you had a glaring weakness that I could expose. I still lost in the end, Gaara said. Everyone does have a weakness, some people just have a better way of handling it. Power isn't always determined by your physical strength. For the first time since he arrived here, Naruto smiled. Well, that is something I can agree on, he said. How are things around here? I never followed the negotiations between the Leaf and Suna. Then again, genins are not given that kind of information. Wait, Kankuro said. You're still a genin? He asked, surprised. Naruto nodded. I have been away from the Leaf over the past 2.5 years, so I haven't had time to participate in the Chunin exams. I can't imagine myself playing over that field though. I think I laughed at those who were repeat offenders. Temari laughed at this. We are all jonins, she said. But you are not too old to enter the exams. I do think you are much stronger to be ranked a genin. Naruto shrugged. I don't usually think about that. He looked thoughtful for a moment before speaking once more. Well, I do think it might pose a problem when taking missions. Genins get to do chores while those higher ranked missions their rank. I'm sure they won't give you chores, Gaara said. Things have been a bit difficult but as you can see, we are managing. You are leaving out that they want to make you Kazekage, Kankuro added in. It is nothing, Gaara said. Naruto smiled. That was something interesting, Gaara the god I'm Kazekage. In what world was he living in? There were certainly more suitable candidates but he wasn't going to ask why. It wasn't his business. Still it was good that a Jinchuriki with a past such as Gaara's was becoming a Kage. He was truly going to become the youngest Kage and since he doesn't look like a bad person, things would go well with Konoha. Congratulations, Gaara. Naruto said. I think that is something special, regardless of the reasons. Certainly, they wouldn't put the Jinchuriki up as a figurehead. There had to be someone they could put in that position. Suna didn't even need to pretend to be strong, it was weak. Its failed invasion in Konoha and proved as much. Not yet, Gaara said. They are still considering it. This village hasn't had an official Kage since the past Kage. There has been someone who assumed the role of leader, but no Kage. I still have to be appointed and do the job worthy of a Kage to be congratulated. You'll do a great job, Gaara, Temari said reassuringly. You've got us to back you up. Ah, family. Naruto lost his smile. He stayed with the Sand siblings for a little while longer. But once time had come for him to leave, he bid them farewell. It hadn't been a bad night. A bit uncomfortable but he had soldiered through it. There were moments but it had been quite lovely. Are you going to be using our training grounds often? Naruto nodded. This is also part of my training trip. He said. I'll come and fetch you tomorrow around 9 a.m. I will show you another training ground where you can train privately. If I feel like it, I might join you. You sounded a bit skeptical when I said I was the strongest wind user in Sooner. Naruto smiled. I wasn't, he said. But it would be lovely to have you join me, Temari. You are another wind user after all. Gaara alone said he would walk Naruto. Kankuro wanted to follow but he was told to stay behind and he obeyed very quickly. Then again, Gaara was someone who you listened to carefully when he spoke. They started out silently but the walk was slow. I actually wanted to talk to you, Gaara started calmly. I have come to consider you as a friend. And I hope that we can be friends. It can happen, Naruto said. There was nothing stopping that from happening. It was either he said he didn't want to make friends or Gaara was just too much that he decided it wouldn't work out. There was nothing wrong with making friends either way. I thought so, Gaara said. I'm not actually being made Kazekage because of my abilities, the village council just fears me and they want to keep me happy and in control by giving me this responsibility. They probably think I will wake up one day and destroy them. My change hasn't done to anything to lift the burden, it has made them even more suspicious since they can't tell what I am thinking. They are putting me here to say, we trust you and want you to lead us but I know the truth. Even so, I will accept the job. They probably think I will fail, but I won't. I have done many things that I will probably never earn forgiveness for, but I still want to do something different. I want to correct what I did in the past. I cannot erase the past, but at least I want to protect the future. And for those who I never wronged, perhaps they will remember me for the good work I did. But even if they choose to remember my past, that is fine. Naruto was honestly surprised by those words. He was silent for a couple of moments as digested them. Forgiveness is truly difficult, especially when you have filled your heart with nothing but hate. But it only damages those who hate. I have never truly seen anyone who stepped out of the darkness to march in the light in the same way as you. People never truly want to accept that they were wrong and they are more willing to pretend that the past never happened. It's safer than apologizing. People want to be forgiven but not willing to do everything to be forgiven, and when they are not forgiven, they turn backwards. You are willing to walk your path even if people do not forgive you, even if people choose to remember you for the dark days. That is special. Naruto looked up to the heavens for a moment. You have taught me something important and I will admire your courage and willingness to stand in the midst of those who hate you and still do good. That isn't something people are willing to do. A couple of weeks later. For how long has it been since he came to this village? Weeks, and there was still no word from Jiraiya. The Sannin had a way: don't contact me, I will contact you. He didn't even have a way of contacting the Sannin except through the toads. But the time here hasn't been all disturbing. Quite honestly, it has been refreshing. And he learned a lot of things about this village and the Sand siblings. It was truly apparent, Gaara wasn't the most loved. It just reminded him of his past in the Hidden Leaf, but at least Gaara could explain why they hated him. Nevertheless, he was truly a menace in the eyes of the villagers, and yet, he was still willing to lead this village. It also didn't make things easy for someone like Temari. She was honestly a beautiful person. Over the past month, he has been training with her, a bit constantly that he had thought he would when she offered to join. She wasn't a bad person and she was truly skilled. But at this stage, she wasn't going to get loved in here. People feared her brother. And he had noticed that Gaara was a little protective of her. If someone hurt his sister, the old Gaara was certainly going to come out and there would be a sand burial. Thinking of this, Naruto laughed. Someone is going to think you are crazy one day, you know, Temari said with a raised eyebrow. Naruto shrugged a bit carelessly. People will always have an opinion about other people, Temari. I have to come to learn that with being human, you think about what you see and you form an opinion of it. I generally don't care about what people think of me. The indifference, Temari realized, it was something he had about a lot of things. He smiled and spoke well, but he was obviously indifferent to a lot of things. He had opinions, but it wasn't always personal. Even now, she really didn't know a lot of things about him personally. Just because he talked and talked didn't mean he opened the doors. No, perhaps the talking was a way to keep you busy. It was strange though, how do you spend so much time with someone and feel like you know them yet realize that you really don't know much about them? What did she know? Personal things. His views. She could never tell. He used, but there was always a lack of emotion in it, a general lack of connection between what he was saying and himself. Was it purposeful perhaps? You're staring, Temari. He was looking at her with those clear blue orbs. They were clear, almost pulling you inside, and yet, there was nothing inside. I was thinking, she said. Naruto was careful about these things, so he didn't ask what she was thinking. He could almost assume what she was thinking, but he wasn't sure. I would assume so. That was it. Temari could never tell what Naruto was thinking. That was the issue. She had no idea what Gaara was thinking, but she felt that there was no disconnection between his words and thoughts. She had a nagging feeling that there was with Naruto, and it was very big. Are you here for a session or do you find something interesting in my body that you like? Naruto asked, smiling. I realize that I won't win beauty contests, but you certainly don't get eye burns from looking at me. Temari smiled. Somehow, he still managed to be honest. Perhaps at times a bit extremely so, but she liked that about him. I brought my fan. Naruto suddenly leapt into the air. Futon. Great wind breakthrough. He released powerful gusts of winds to the unsuspecting Temari. The powerful gust slammed into the blonde Jonin and sent her flying backwards. Temari flipped several times before landing on a knee. When she looked up, Naruto was right in front of her. He kicked the ground and dust picked up, and into her face. Temari quickly closed her eyes to avoid getting blinded. Naruto twisted around swiftly and kicked Temari on her forehead, sending him flying backwards once more. He didn't attack her again, he stopped and watched, almost impatiently waiting for her to explode. What the hell was that for? Temari shouted, glaring at Naruto. I didn't say we could start, you just went on to attack me like that. What if someone thought you were really attacking me? Naruto shrugged a bit carelessly, almost on purpose. I was really attacking you, he responded. Tamari responded, opening her fan. She swung it a bit violently. The fan released multiple blades of wind that sped towards Naruto. He knew they could chop down a tree, the blades. It was that dangerous, and yet, Tamari released such a jutsu. She was mad at him for his careless response and was enticing a response from him. Well, she was asking for it. He did hand seals. Violent sand storm. It was like a blow of wind. Sand picked up, twisting violently and in great speed. The jutsu didn't travel much. It was short range and could be used for defensive purposes, but the speed of the sand within the storm could blast through human flesh. The jutsu blocked Tamari's before dying down slowly. Tamari flashed behind Naruto, some distance back. She attempted to swing her fan, but Naruto suddenly appeared in front of her. He stopped her from swinging her fan by grabbing it forcefully and then pushed her back. Tamari quickly recovered her balance and stood still. You should really work on your short-range skills. I dislike depending on one thing because the moment you lose it, you're out of your comfort zone. Jiraiya taught me kenjutsu, but you'll never see me carrying a sword. However, when the situation comes, I am able to handle it. Tamari was a bit annoyed by that lecture. If you want to see my taijutsu skills, we can have a go. Naruto shook his head, smiling. I've seen it, and I don't want to get hit by your fan again, he said. Tamari was silent. You're a bit rough though, she said, massaging her temple where Naruto kicked her. He wasn't very merciful. There were those who said they couldn't hit a woman, Naruto could hit. And he did as hard as he could. Perhaps that was the good thing about him. He didn't take it easy on her. He fought seriously. Gentleness is when we are in the bed, Tamari, well, unless you like it rough. Bam! The fan landed on his left shoulder. A flustered Tamari was glaring at him, trying to fight off the image Naruto had just painted on her head. It could be that he was a pervert. But he really did like teasing her. Was it because she was innocent? I'm going to shove this fan down your throat if you keep saying things like that. While massaging his shoulder, Naruto still laughed. Don't be like that, Tamari. You are not a child anymore. And I am helping you get used to such talk. You are already at that age. Naruto didn't mistake that Tamari was older than both Gaara and Kankuro. And of course him. How can you be comfortable saying things like that? You get used to it, Naruto said. My sensei is a man who proudly claims he is a super pervert. If you spend time with him, you'll pick up things. There were days I used to receive nosebleeds seeing him with women, but I am used to it. And I hang around that ground as well. They say things a bit for graphically while touching you. Tamari had to mentally slap herself from imaging Naruto with a woman, touching him while whispering things to his ears. That happens in the bars. I know you go there. Naruto shrugged. I don't go there to meet people or do anything. Why do you go there? Naruto was silent for a couple of moments. He was thinking if he should answer or not. In the end, he responded. Observation, maybe drunk people amuse me and I go there for the show they put out. Aside from madness, what would you observe? That madness, Naruto said. Madness aside, you see many people in bars, happy, sad, miserable, lost. People go there for different reasons. Some are running away from their problems, some are busy making deals, some are exchanging information, and some are with the wrong crowd. You see many things in a bar full of people. Why would you want to observe such things, if you are not going to do anything about it? Naruto shrugged. Who knows, maybe it helps me understand people better, maybe I don't even go there for that only but just want to get drunk and forget about the troubles of being a shinobi, he shook his head. If you want to see Gaara liven up a bit, take him there and get him drunk. Tamari tried to think about it but she couldn't even form an image because she could never imagine her brother getting drunk. Would he even agree to go to a bar and drinking? No, he would not. If he does, it was just 1 cup, and he'd nurse it for 7 days. I don't think that will happen, Tamari said. Are you done for the day? Naruto nodded. I have always been curious, Tamari started slowly. You are always in your hotel room from noon till late, what do you do alone? Naruto looked up into the sky for a moment before looking straight at Tamari. In my first year at the academy, I had no friends, no one. The kids avoided me, and their parents openly told them not to play with me. During lunch breaks I sat alone, being ignored. In the streets, people looked at with contempt, so after classes, I would immediately go back to my apartment and sit there. What would be the purpose of going out if people didn't want me in the streets? Naruto asked before shaking his head. Perhaps these days I do it out of habit more than anything. That was perhaps the first time he said something about himself without looking indifferent, without shrugging. She felt, those were his thoughts, his experience, that was the question he had asked himself back then. Temari felt sad. Yet, she felt there was something she was missing. Temari felt sad, realizing just how miserable life had been for him. What were you thinking about while alone? Naruto merely smiled. Temari realized, she wasn't going to get a response. You ever thought of breaking that habit? I hold things of the past too closely, just can't seem to let go easily, Naruto said. There was the indifference, yet this time, Temari didn't feel annoyed by it. It isn't that much of a habit, is it? Perhaps not, that was just the beginning of Emperor Naruto's rule. Crown high voltage. Agar opchahet ho ki our powerful Kunoichi Naruto ki army join Karain. To like, share our comment Karna Mat Bulna. Our Han, subscribe to Fox Fan Fiction. Part 2, coming soon.